All right, hello, welcome to the Off by One Security Stream. It's Friday the 13th, special day in December. With me this week, we've got Phil Wylie. So as people are joining here, I'll just talk a little bit about, real quickly, kind of what led to this particular stream. As you probably know, Phil's a big evangelist and such in the community, and a lot of the questions, I'm sure he gets it constantly, maybe even more than I do, but I certainly get it a lot as well, is everywhere from how do I get a job in the offensive space, whether it be penetration testing or red teaming, or even IT in general and security, but then also more specific things like how do I get into vulnerability research or reverse engineering malware? And if I already have a job doing something in security, how do I go about moving laterally in the organization to a group that I want to be in? A lot of us start out in one position and we kind of get stuck there for a while. And like, what kind of tricks or things you can do to get into a team that you really want to be in? That also includes, of course, facing outwardly to the community and doing talks and research and all that. So there's a lot of things we can talk about in this one. I was just chatting with Phil before we got started here, and he has a presentation that he's done a couple of times specifically on kind of what is pen testing, breaking into the pen test space and getting a job there. We want to make this one, so we'll go through some slides and we'll also just have a conversation. So I'll be asking Phil some questions, he can ask me some questions. And like I said, a lot of people DM on Twitter or whatever else, Discord, asking these types of questions. So if you're here, we definitely encourage you to ask questions. It's a great opportunity to ask Phil and myself and chat amongst yourselves as well as to what's going on in this space. So I guess let me start by asking Phil to give a little background about himself, and then we'll jump in.
Sure. Yeah. So my background is this coming January, I make 21 years. I've been in information security. I've been on the offensive security side for over 12 years. That was really the one area that I stayed in the longest. The next longest period of time was in application security, where I found out about pen testing. So it's been an area I've been really passionate about. And even before working in any vendor roles, I've kind of been an evangelist for offensive security, because sometimes I think it's just really underestimated the power of it. And, a lot of cases, people only have pen tests done because of compliance reasons. I think it was good because compliance brought awareness to a lot of companies that weren't even doing pen testing. But I think we really need to get beyond the compliance check mark and working on fully utilizing pen testing and offensive security services for its full potential. So I also used to be an instructor. I taught at Dallas College for almost 4 years. I taught pen testing, web app pen testing there. I still teach workshops at conferences, and I currently work at Horizon 3 as an evangelist and a community representative there, and kind of sharing about offensive security. A lot of the talks I do are community-based, and just kind of sharing. One of the things I've kind of learned is the things that we're teaching people that are just trying to learn about pen testing careers or learn about pen testing, that same information is valuable to blue teamers and management types to help them understand the offensive security space better.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. By the way, I just switched microphone. I was told that the mic wasn't good. Is that better, Randall? I can see you can nod your head if it's better. Okay, cool. Thanks. It was a little muffled before, so sorry if I jumped off screen and swapped headphones there. Cool. So yeah, again, if you're just joining in, I see a bunch of more people joining. We are going to go through and talk about kind of tips and tricks and getting into pen testing and offensive security space. And if you have questions, we want this to be open to chat, because it's a question that a lot of us get often, which is there still going to be a career in this space? Are we going to be replaced by AI? How do I get the job I want? How do I get better at going from maybe a junior pen tester and getting into vulnerability research or another area? So definitely ask questions if you do have them. But we're going to go ahead and bring up a cool Dr. Pepper vending machine, says Sim. We'll go ahead and bring up a slide deck here in a moment, and we'll start walking through some slides. If you have questions when we get to one, I will chat a little bit about it. Phil and I will go back and forth. But again, I want it to be interactive, because with so many questions come in on this particular topic, I can't tell you how many times on the Off by One Discord channel or server, we've got about 2,000 people on there now, and so many times the questions that are asked in the general channel, we're just pointing people over to like the new to security or pen test space. And a lot of those questions and resources like, hey, education's expensive. Like, what's a good way to do self-learning? And what's a good way to like get into an expensive class at a cheaper rate? There's cool stuff like that we can talk about as well. If you want to bring up your slide deck, Phil, we can just start jumping in.
Sure.
All right. Hey, Hector.
There you go. So this presentation is based off of one that I used to give at Dallas College that became a conference talk and then ended up becoming my book, The Pentester Blueprint. The exception is I added some parts to this because I did a keynote at PancakesCon, the second PancakesCon, and part of your presentation was on something technical, security-wise. The other one was like on a hobby. So it's kind of a shorter presentation that I added on to the Pentester Blueprint discussion, which basically goes beyond telling you what is required to learn to be a pen tester, about the pen tester role, some ways that you can get experience, because that's one of the toughest things about getting in offensive security is actually getting the hands-on experience. You can have the certs, but sometimes it is difficult to get the professional experience, and there's ways to get that and ways you can document it. So that's part of this presentation.
What are your thoughts on one thing that I've run into a lot is a lot of people who move into cyber straight out of university or straight from Starbucks barista or whatever, a lot of people lack the background in IT in general. So never worked as a network engineer or a sysadmin or some other role. How important do you think that experience is before going into cyber, or do you think it's possible and good to just go straight in?
I think you can go straight in, but the thing I have to say, you can't skip. So I had the fortune of starting out in IT as a sysadmin. So, back then, getting, a job as a sysadmin, there really weren't a lot of pen testing roles. They were probably around, but we just weren't aware of them. And me, like a lot of people, would have probably been impatient and wanted to jump right into the pen testing. But fortunately, I had to go through being a sysadmin. And my sysadmin career was one of the most important things I did in becoming a pen tester, because if you're hacking a system and you get a shell or command line access, if you don't know the command line, you're going to be doing a lot of Googling and research and wasting your time. So you really need to know the basics. And one of the things I say, you don't have to spend time in IT or be a sysadmin. There's some people out there that really believe that. And one of the things I'd say too is you hear a lot about gatekeeping, but don't always write people off as gatekeepers, because some very reputable people I know in the industry that wouldn't gatekeep. They're just kind of sharing their experience. But my opinion is, if you gain those skills, I would say if you're going to be a pen tester and you're doing network pen tests, then you need to have sysadmin level skills without necessarily having to be a sysadmin. So you can't skip through those trainings. You need to understand that, because it's going to help you a lot more. And depending on what area of pen testing you're going into, if you have like a developer background, or you're a QA analyst for a development team, those are the prime skills to learn pen testing for, like web apps and applications. So I think just having the skills, you don't necessarily have to have the years of experience, although it's helpful. I mean, if you want to be patient and spend some time in a sysadmin role or some other blue team roles, it's only going to help you.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like, especially like what you were talking about, living off the land, the more you know about the local shell commands and, the different underlying technology on that particular system and the way it works, the better you're going to be and more effective. I just taught day one of 660 today in Washington, D.C., and day one's mostly about network protocol attacks and device attacks. So we talk about attacking routers and switches and 802.1x and NAC and multi-factor authentication bypass. So like all that stuff, if you've got a background in network engineering and TCP/IP, I can tell when you watch the students do the labs who has that background and not. So yeah, totally agree with you.
Yeah, that's the advanced pen testing and exploit development course.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually took that one.
Oh,
I didn't
cool.
take the exam, but I took that course years ago.
How many years?
Wow, it's been 2015, 2016,
Oh, wow.
something like that. But yeah, in my opinion, it was my favorite SANS course that I've taken.
Oh, cool. Glad to hear that. So slightly malicious, you asked a question. In terms of certs for someone with pen test experience, how does GXPN compare to OffSec certs? That's those are tough questions to answer, because a lot of it depends on the hiring manager or the tech lead, whoever is going to be interviewing, and what they think about that particular certification. Like offensive security, courses are great. SANS courses are great. There's so many options out there. They at least historically, I don't want to speak inaccurately, but everyone I've talked to, because I've talked to hundreds of people that have like the OSCP and other certs, that's always been more of the do-it-yourself approach, where at least historically you're given the content, you're giving some videos, you're giving some workbooks, and you've got access to a lab environment, and you're expected to figure things out on your own. And if you can't, there's that try harder motto where you're expected to still try, which is great, because if you figure something out yourself, you're going to remember it much better and you're going to learn more than if someone just feeds you the answers. But on the flip side of that, like I remember when I first got into vulnerability research, I had a lot of questions and I couldn't find the answers to them. One silly example, I'll type it in the chat, was FS0x30. This right here, what I just typed in the chat, I'd see it referencing FRAC articles and stuff a lot. And I was like, what the heck is F0x30? And I couldn't find the answer. Now, obviously, you can ask ChatGPT and it'll tell you, but still, it's more of a Windows internals thing. Like if you dereference that register offset on a 32-bit version of Windows in a process in userland, you're dereferencing a pointer to the process environment block, which is a structure per process. The kernel equivalent would be K process, E process. So it's like that gets into like the really Windows internal side, and it's important to be able to understand what's happening under the hood of something versus just typing in the commands and using tools, actually understanding how the internals work, because a lot of times things will break or you have to extend or modify something. And ultimately, if I need an answer to something, I want to be able to get that. And, both the 660 course of GXPN and the OffSec OSCP course, they both provide really good value, but it's just kind of different perspectives, different styles, pedagogy and all that. And going back to the original thing I said, which is it depends on the hiring manager and what they believe to be the case. I mean, a lot of times, I'm sure Phil will agree, is like if I do an interview, I think it's great that you have certs and college and experience at prior places, but I'm the type of interviewer who's going to get your hands on a keyboard or get you writing on a whiteboard, because I want to make sure that you can actually do these things. Any thoughts there, Phil?
Yeah, one of the things I'd say too, over the years, I've seen the GXPN being highly regarded, and there's a lot of cases I've seen, like even the GPen being listed on a list of requirements for a job that OSCP may be one of those. But I can say as far as the courses go, GXPN is more advanced than the OSCP. Both good courses, but one of the things too is when you're looking for jobs, look at some of the certs that are in the job listings and kind of get a feel for what's most common. OSCP has been very popular for a lot of years, and a lot of the SANS certs are very popular. And there's some other certs that are lesser known that are becoming more popular, like even some of the Hack the Box stuff is even being listed, even TCM Academy. But one of the things you have to look at too is what's more widely accepted. So what I see more widely accepted are SANS and offensive security certs are usually more widely accepted.
Yeah, so oftentimes the recruiters and the posting out there, that might be a simple filter they're using. It's unfortunate in some cases, in a lot of cases, because you don't need certs. You don't need to have taken things. So many people, including myself, or self-studied. And that's why it's important to get out there in the community, make a name for yourself, contribute to the community, do presentations, because that reputation you build is going to get you through the front door as well. And ultimately, when you get into the interview room, especially at big companies like Google and Microsoft, you're going to be putting your hands on the keyboard and on the whiteboard and all that. But they're good as like, filters and things like that.
And to add to that, a lot of companies, when you go to apply for pen testing roles, they will give you an environment to perform a pen test against to prove your skills, whether you have a certification or not. And other areas I think that you can really demonstrate those skills that, in my opinion, is more impressive is, kind of thinking more towards the security research side, get some CVEs. I saw a real good article several years ago. Someone from the community, Joe Helly, was playing around with installing open source applications on a web server he had at home. He'd perform a pen test against it, find CVEs, report it to the company, and document those. So then you can put those in your resume, in your LinkedIn profile, and under publications, you can put your CVEs. So you can put a description of it and put a link to that CVE, so you can actually show proof that you got that CVE and you're not just making something up. So those are some ways to prove it. In my opinion, that's more impressive because you're able to find something that didn't exist before. Whereas, a vulnerability scanner will find CVEs, but if you're finding something that didn't exist, that's more impressive.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. Let's jump in a slide.
Okay. So you're kind of getting into what pen testing is, and so most of your listeners are probably understand, but it's assessing security from an adversary perspective. So you hear all the time in the news companies were breached by hackers or nation states. So what a better way to assess your security than the perspective of threat actor? And I know a lot of people say, well, you got vulnerability scanners, but some of the issues with vulnerability scanners is they find false positives and sometimes they find false negatives. There could be mitigating controls for that specific CVE that Nessus or Nexpose or Qualys finds that is not truly exploitable. So the only way to tell if it's exploitable, validate the vulnerability and see if it can be exploited. So using this type of approach is more effective. And then also too, you've got a better understanding for the risk severity. Sometimes companies may not have the budget to fix some of these vulnerabilities. They have to file a risk acceptance. But if you're able to prove that it's exploitable and a risk for being exploited, then it kind of gives more justification and helps get the budget for actually being able to remediate.
Yeah, and an important thing I haven't seen in a lot of pen test classes out there, if you do go take courses or self-study, or even just doing it on your own, learning how to use the tools and using Kali Linux and all that, is the importance of the scoping, the rules of engagement, pen test insurance, all those things that you have to do before you actually get the engagement and get to do the fun stuff. And then on the tail end, of course, how good of a report that you write. So those things are very important as well to keep in mind when you're studying up on this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And one of the reasons I'm a big fan of the penetration testing execution standard, because it goes through a lot of those pre-engagement activities that you may not learn, like you mentioned, may not hear about in these pen testing courses. Because some of the courses that are similar to like the offset courses, they jump right into the different steps, but don't go into any of the details about pre-engagement. Another thing too that kind of gets overlooked in some courses like that is in real world, you need to be able to find the vulnerabilities manually, but you also need to learn how to use vulnerability scanners, because most pen test jobs you've got so much scope that you're not going to be able to sit there and manually test everything. So that's one thing that you can do to learn a tool there that may be helpful. And you can download like Nessus Essentials. You can scan like 16 IP addresses with it and learn how to use Nessus, which is kind of one extra tool that you can show on there that otherwise, could be held against you for not knowing how to use a specific tool.
Yeah, and you made me think of something else. We talked about this today, and this is something I don't see in a lot of courses or documents and you're self-studying, is a lot of times there'll be an opportunity potentially to do something like, for example, I'll give an example from today. We're looking at hacking routing protocols. Well, most companies don't want you hacking their routing protocols because they're worried about the backbone. And so they might have put it out of scope against the rules. And oftentimes your job as a pen tester to add value is to, during your daily meetings or whatever, however often you have meetings with a customer, say, hey, I looked at a router configuration and I see a potential vulnerability where I could take over your routing domain and inject routes. So do you mind if I set up a virtual router? Because you can do that with like the Cisco CSR 1000 or Dynamips or others. And I can take your same configuration, demonstrate to you in a lab environment where it's safe that I could do this thing. And then because I demonstrated that to you, could you please give me access to that specific thing I want access to now to let me further laterally move and give you more value?
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. And so here we kind of gives more the why about pen testing. So as mentioned kind of earlier, regulatory compliance really drove pen testing. So payment card industry data security standard. I used to do lots of PCI pen testing, and it really seemed to really drive the need for pen testing. I remember I used to go to some local meetups in Dallas and security conferences, and there'd be like 2 or 3 of us pen testers there. And now you go places and there's a lot more, so that the regulatory compliance has grown it, but it's also at the same time caused some issues with just the checkbox based pen tests. And so there's other things coming along that are requiring pen test, and it's kind of nice to see, like HIPAA, I think, is requiring pen test against medical devices, because several years ago, someone figured out how to hack insulin pumps and pacemakers, and those could be used to do harm.
Yep, good old Barnaby Jack. Yep, yeah. Rest in peace.
Yeah, and just like a lot of technology, people don't think about security as an afterthought. And then medical devices, people think, who would ever harm anyone? But I think we're starting to see nowadays that that's more of an opportunity that the bad guys or threat actors would actually try to take.
Yeah, I've been preaching on that for a while now around that we don't learn from our past. I mean, you look at the crypto space with smart contracts, with Solidity and blockchain and all of that, and all the vulnerabilities that people were discovering and are still available. And security wasn't there from the start because all these companies are rushing to be the first to get things out there and to capitalize. But then now we've got the same thing going on with AI, where there's not a whole lot of documentation around how to do proper model testing and do adversarial AI work. And we're just running into that same problem again and again, where we don't learn from the past and secure things inherently from the start. But from our side, that gives us opportunity to have jobs. So that's good.
And so it's kind of some synonymous terms here too. One of the things I want to make sure to share the difference between is a lot of times you'll hear pen testing referred to as red teaming. So pen testing is really not red teaming. It's just been something that it could be vendors, I think, that really probably got that term going, or people that just didn't know any better. So one of the things I would advise you to know is know the difference, because red teaming and adversary emulation are the same thing. Pen testing's not. I worked at a company once, and it's kind of funny because when I went to work there, it was interesting how many people on the security team didn't know the difference between a vulnerability scan, a vulnerability assessment, a pen test, or red team operation. We had a director that wanted a red team operation done against the SAP app. And so just understanding the difference. And that's one of the things too, especially being a consultant or someone that's doing these services, you need to understand the difference. So that way you can kind of make sure that the customers say they want a red team operation against the application, you can kind of, explain the difference and make sure you're on the same page so they're getting the right thing and so forth. But there's a lot of different confusion there. But penetration tester, or pen tester for short, you hear ethical hacker, offensive security, and adversary security. Adversarial security is one of the ones I see more commonly, but just understanding the different types of terms. And one of the reasons I included this slide previously is at one time, some of these jobs would be like some security engineer or analyst, but you're performing the duties of a pen tester or some offensive security role, but job descriptions weren't really calling it out. And so now they are getting better about that. You see a lot of roles, they are listed as a penetration tester or different synonymous terms related to that role, and not just, security engineer 1 or senior security engineer. And then you have to dig in the job title to see what type of role it actually is.
Yeah, for sure. Red teaming, I typically define the difference personally around, like you said, adversary emulation, where if I want to go and you want me to test your SOC and your security operations and your adversarial emulation pipeline and all that, and I can go and emulate APT 28 or whatever it is and base it off of MITRE ATT&CK framework and use the TTPs, and like all that aligns more with the red teaming side of the house, where oftentimes the scope tends not to be nearly as limited. Oftentimes in pen testing, the customer is often informed and a lot of people know that it's coming, where red team, a lot of times, a lot of the people aren't informed about it. What other things do you consider to be the difference?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways to distinguish or tell the difference is with a pen test, you're looking for all vulnerabilities that could be exploited. With a red team operation, adversary emulation, you're trying to emulate a threat actor. You're using things like social engineering, even physical security breaches to gain access to stuff the same way a real world threat actor would. And usually, as Stephen mentioned, it goes unmentioned. So with pen testing, you let people know you're really trying to get the pen test done. It's pen tests are referred to as a time box test. So you're limited on time and you really can't try to be quiet and go undetected. But with a red team exercise, you are trying to go undetected. There's a control group, which is usually like the CISO, maybe some management. You don't always tell like the blue team management because you're actually testing the blue team. And so you're wanting them to have a natural response. You're seeing if they're detecting any of this activity or not. And, it's interesting because this is kind of a way to test your incident response plan. And one of the best outcomes I heard was this company, they had an incident response company on retainer, and this red team operation was going on. And one of the SOC manager reaches out to the CISO and say, "Hey, we got some malicious activity going on, but don't worry about it. We have the IR team investigating it." And the CISO came back and said, "Yeah, this was a red team operation. This is supposed to be happening." So that's a good outcome, because you want the technology to stop it or your staff to stop it, but you want to make sure that you're detecting it and what to do when that happens. So that's some of the major differences. And you're leveraging social engineering. Some of those techniques that don't get used as much in pen testing. You know, pen test used to be more full scope, but back to compliance pen testing and started limiting what can be done. And some of the things, the limitations I see too, that are kind of gaps is with the phishing campaigns. Nowadays, a lot of people have the email phishing campaign software where they're basically just testing clicks, which I think is it's good for security awareness, but you need to be testing with some kind of payload to see what happens beyond the click. Or, you know, this is a good way to test for ransomware readiness. If someone clicks on malware or ransomware, what happens from there? If you're not using a payload, you don't know, and you just kind of got a false sense of security because you think only maybe 10% click on, you know, the links.
Yeah, for sure. Take a look at the question that's posted up there from Max. What do you think about that?
So CS, I guess they're talking about computer science or cyber, I guess cybersecurity.
Yeah, cybersecurity.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm seeing is, you know, the U.S. market's been a little bit tougher too, but entry-level jobs like SOC analyst, one of the things I'm seeing that's really most helpful for people with a difficult job market is networking. Make sure to be networking. There's some people in cybersecurity that are more concerned with their OPSEC, operational security, than they are getting jobs. So just make sure you're networking. LinkedIn is a good place, and different Discord servers, but also in person too. So one of the things I do, and I'm a firm believer in networking, is, you know, when you connect with people online, make sure to go to conferences and different meetups and try to connect with people in person. And there may be some cases where you go to these meetups and these people aren't active on social media, so you can actually get your resume in the hands of a hiring manager or someone that can get that resume to a hiring manager. That's one of the best ways to do it. And because whenever I was teaching at Dallas College, my students that were networking had a lot better chances of getting jobs than the students that weren't networking.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to go further on that, back what we were talking about with doing some security research, you know, pick an area that's maybe underlooked at, under analyzed, and try to contribute to the security, to the community, build up a some type of presentation or paper that you can release and submit to talk for CFPs. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the networking. If you get your name out there and build a brand, it's going to be easier to get a job. And also the other thing we were talking about earlier, if you were here or not, is it's not bad to go and take a step back and say, well, let me get a job in somewhere in the IT space, anywhere from a help desk, a sysadmin, network engineer, whatever else. And a lot of us, like Phil and myself, we pivoted over into security after having a background in IT in general. So that's always an option as well. You mentioned you think too many hiring managers are hoping AI. Yeah, I just saw a LinkedIn email today that was saying that some fintech company has basically replaced like the equivalent of 100 people with AI, and they haven't hired anybody in a year. I think that some jobs will certainly be impacted more than others, like certain developer positions and others by AI. But at least for now, I'm continuing to look at it, and Phil, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it as well, but I'm continuing to look at, like, we've got this continuous pen testing. I know, Phil, you work with that, and we've got AI, machine learning, and all these things that could theoretically replace us. But if you look at it as an aid and you learn how to be more effective using that technology, how it saves you time so you can focus more on things that it can't do, I mean, that's going to be good. Even take a look at something like Google Project Nap Time and Deep Big Sleep. That's their binary exploitation and fuzzing AI kind of research that they're doing. And they're still stating today it's going to be quite a while before we're going to be able to replace security researchers. So I think the combination of, like what Phil said, with networking, doing research, getting presentations out there, submitting to CFPs, doing capture the flags, getting some certs if you can, consider a job in IT space that's not in security, and pivot, you know, at some point in the future, learn how to use AI and ML as an attack aid and make you more effective. Like, those are some good ways to get started.
Yeah, that's some good points, because one of the things, you have these systems that are performing these attacks, humans have to configure those to be able to do those type of attacks. And so one of the things too is, you kind of mentioned some of the things AI can't do. Just like one of the things now is, no one has figured out how to automate web app pen testing yet, because you can have the same programming language, the same application server, the same identical application, but the business logic can be totally different. So no one's figured out how to do that yet. And one of the things that our CEO of our company says that I really think is good is, he talks about our product, saying that our product basically lets pen testers focus on the things that can get them on the stage at DEF CON, do things more interesting, because Steven can tell you there's a lot of stuff to pen testing can be pretty boring. So validating SSL and TLS related vulnerabilities that are really not a very big impact, but you spend so much time validating all those vulnerabilities. So if you had something that you can automate, do the boring stuff quicker, and you can do more interesting stuff because you've got limited time on a pen test. If you're a consultant, you may only have 40 hours. If you're an internal resource, you may have 4 weeks, but the more time you have to focus on more interesting stuff, because a lot of times people are bogged down with the boring stuff, it's really kind of hard for them to progress.
Yeah, exactly. Figure out how to automate the stuff you don't like to do. Right?
Yeah.
And Bobbert's question there: do pen testers usually build tools as much as red teamers? No, in my experience, no. Red teamers, especially nowadays, the more red teamers and consultant groups I talk to, they're having to do more of that custom tool creation and zero-day discovery versus in the past, just because security, it's matured quite a bit over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, this was just easy, really easy. Now it takes more work. So having that skill set to build your own stagers and loaders for Cobalt Strike, to be able to get around EDR and stuff is important. So I don't typically see pen testers doing that much. But one last thing I'll say there is, one of the ways that I was able to move laterally in an organization into a team or onto a team that I wanted to be on is, as I was working as a security position that I didn't really want, I was doing research, writing tools, scripts, things like that, and I was giving them to the team that I wanted to be on. Like, it might be a IDA Pro plugin or IDA Python script or whatever else. And over time, they were like, who is this person who keeps giving us stuff, and why is he on that team instead of our team? And I got my foot in the door at that team that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thinking back to that too, as you mentioned earlier, easier to move from a help desk or desktop support, other areas of IT, into security. And that's actually how I got my first break into cybersecurity or information security, because I was working for a company. A mortgage company. They knew I was interested in security because I had my CISSP and I got the NSA's InfoSec assessment methodology certification. And so they knew I was interested, and I got to move over. And companies aren't always willing to bring someone in without security experience. But if you're internal, they kind of know that you know the environment, which is important, because even you bring on an experienced security professional, they're gonna have to learn that environment. If you've worked in that industry, that can be important. So there's a lot of things that they take in consideration. So sometimes it's easier if you're in a company to move over.
Yep, absolutely.
And so this slide here just kind of shows some of the different specializations. When you're kind of starting out, it's kind of a good idea to be a generalist. And as you get experience, then you can specialize in things. Because after you've been in it for a while, for you to really get good, you have to kind of specialize. Because you see a lot of folks that are pretty well known in the industry. One that comes to mind to me is Tiberius. When he started out, he was doing network pen test and web app, and he found out that he liked web app more, focused on that, and he's up to skills, been a lot better. So maybe through doing network pen testing, maybe you get to do some phishing campaigns, you may find out that you like red teaming better. So you kind of find what you like best and what it kind of comes more naturally for you, so you can excel. But kind of at first, you can start out, specializing. And then if you have any kind of IoT or ICS or OT background, those are good backgrounds to get into, because those are less common and less people have experience in those areas. So those are some of those areas that if you've got that kind of experience, it might be helpful in trying to break in.
Yeah, and you maybe think as well, like on hardware, where it says medical devices. I've got Atlas coming on next Friday, and he's going to be talking about car hacking, medical device hacking, and embedded hacking. So that's definitely a specialization, and that's the cool thing about it, right? You can find what you love. I love vulnerability research. That's the one that really I wanted to get into, and has kept me there for a long time. And like Sean, you're saying right there, working deeper and looking to get over into vulnerability research or hacking and stuff like that. That's a nice thing, is you can pivot from deeper over. You can go the other direction, write malware. You can be offensive malware author or reverse malware. And take a look at like Cuckoo Sandbox. It's an automated malware sandbox that's open source, freely available. That's been out for a long time, and certainly uses things like machine learning and automation to be able to go in and assess just the enormous amount of malware that comes in, where you get to save your time to focus on the malware that's more interesting and requires some human to take a look at it. You said at the bottom there, binary exploitation going downhill, should that specialty be avoided? That's another question I get asked all the time. I just will remind folks that smashing a stack for fun and profit from Aleph 1 came out 30 years ago. And still today, stack exploitation is sometimes possible. So all of this stuff has been around for decades now. The mitigations are the challenging part. And what's going away are the techniques that were tried and true and reliable that we could repeat. And what you're dealing with more nowadays is like conditional exploitation that based on the environment and really understanding how to get in there and groom the heap and take advantage of just very unique scenarios under certain conditions, you can still get things to work. And the bounty, you've probably heard me say this a million times, back in 2014, if I sold a USAF to free exploit to an ethical buyer, I might only get $20,000 or $30,000, but today I might get $500,000 because they know it's that much harder, so you get paid more for your time. So I don't think there's any reason to think binary exploitation is going away. It's just harder.
Yeah, and I would think it would be a good idea for someone to learn that, because if you think about like the COBOL programmers and stuff that all of a sudden came into need and making a high dollar because no one was doing it anymore because everyone was getting away from it because it was thought to be totally going away. So I would think that would be something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And there's also, look at AI. I mean, a lot of people are, the concern is that we're going to fire a bunch of developers. We're going to be automating the code writing part, and that it's going to be more laziness where people aren't going to understand much about the languages that they're having machine learning and AI writing for them. So I think there's a concern, and especially like in university, you don't see nearly as many university programs focusing on C++ and lower level languages. They're looking at higher level languages. So those with the specialty in that low level stuff and really understand under the hood what's happening, I think that'll go a long way as well.
I have one question for you. So for someone that wanted to move into vulnerability research, say someone's got a pen testing background, what would you recommend as far as being able to learn vulnerability research?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you can take a class, that's going to allow you to do a shortcut there. But if you're doing self-study, there is so much research out there, so many videos on YouTube. I mean, if you look at this channel alone, there's everything from exploiting a Stack Overflow, browser exploitation, V8 exploitation, Linux heap exploitation, kernel exploitation. And that's just my channel. There's so much free information out there. The part that I would recommend is people are always asking, well, okay, I followed this paper and I went through what it told me to do and I'm done. What do I do next for practice? If you go out to exploitdb.com and you look at the vulnerable apps, there's like thousands of exploits with the downloadable vulnerable app sitting right there next to it. And the thing would be, don't look at the answer. Don't look at the exploit, but download the vulnerable app and treat it as there's a 0 day in there, even though there's not, right? But the point is, there's a vulnerability in there. You don't know what it is. That's going to require you to do things like start learning how to read RFCs, analyzing file formats for documents, and then trying to fuzz and find the vulnerability yourself. And if you get stuck or super frustrated, then you can look at the answer that's in the exploit, still go back and exploit it. And there's thousands and thousands of them there to kind of help you get up to speed. But also playing in capture the flags. Even though a lot of those binaries that you're exploiting aren't real world and they're like puzzles, you're still using the same tools, the same techniques, same parts of your brain to try to solve these problems, and you're gaining a ton of experience. Obviously, getting an internship with somebody and that's another question people ask is, how do I get an internship? Like back when I had a fuzzing farm for browser exploitation, I would have an intern or two. And the way it worked was I would have them triage the crashes that my fuzzer was doing, and then they would learn from me by me weaponizing it. And it was a great situation. I don't do as much browser exploitation right now, but there's opportunities if you can demonstrate that you've got a skill that someone who you're looking up to could benefit from, you can help each other out. So I think those are some things that you can do, but really understanding the fundamentals of programming as well. Low-level languages like Objective-C, C, C++. Rust is not going to replace the world anytime soon. I mean, look at Microsoft. They replaced part of the Win32k.sys driver with Rust, if you look in System32, but it's a very slow move. And I was just talking to David Weston at Microsoft, who's the VP of OS Security at Hackfest a couple months ago in Los Angeles, and I basically said, like, what's going on with the Rust thing? Like, it's basically, you've got so many developers. Think about all the millions and millions of lines of code that Microsoft has, and think about all the decades of dependencies and all these different developers out there making third-party applications, drivers, and products that all depend on the way Windows OS works now. It's not going to be easy for them to go and just start swapping out things with Rust. There's also the fact that Rust is not nearly as mature as C++. Think back to when HD Moore moved from Perl for Metasploit over to Ruby, and they were trying to decide between Python and Ruby. They chose that one because the developers of Ruby were willing to work with them to further the language to support some of the challenges they have with Metasploit. But it's a lot of work that goes into it. So I guess that's my initial thoughts there, Phil.
So you're kind of missing some classes. What were some classes or courses that you can take for exploit development?
I mean, obviously, I teach for SANS, so there's the SANS courses out there. Offensive Security has courses. What I really recommend is read the syllabus, because a lot of people really don't read the syllabus. Go and look online for students who have written reviews about the course. Talk to people with the certification. Get past the ego of it, though. There's a lot of people out there that are super fan people of this one thing, and a lot of times that has to do with the fact that that's the cert they got. You want to make sure it's the right one for you. There's also great courses out there by people like Peter Van Ickhout, who is Corland coder. He's got an amazing course on Windows 10 and 11 heap grooming, which is a really important part of exploitation. Exodus Intelligence has a great course. The challenge for a lot of people is those courses are very expensive, and I understand that predicament. At SANS, we have a work-study program where you can take the course at like 1/4 of the cost. You just have to help out and be a facilitator at the event. And I'm hoping this doesn't cause me pain, but reaching out to people who can help you out. So like if you're on my Discord server on Off by One, and you reach out to me and you say, hey, I really can't afford this class, and I think I could pull off the facilitator thing, but how do I go about doing that? Not just me, but other people out there can help you. If you make that effort, we might ask you to do a little bit more work because there's a lot of people asking for that. Like, well, show me that you really want it, that kind of thing. But, there's those ways, but there's also the self-study route, because there's so much the advantage you have today versus when I got into this is that you've got Google and you've got millions of documents and research out there. You've got AI, all these ways to learn that weren't available back then. There's pros and cons to that. On the one side, you get information quickly. On the other side of that, it's not making you work as hard to find the solutions to things, which really goes a long way if you figure things out yourself as opposed to asking the question and getting the answers fed to you so much.
Very cool. Yeah. So I think maybe we should pivot over to some of the things that would help, because I can see we're getting short on time now. So, maybe start discussing some of the things that helps people get experience as a pen tester. So just kind of some of the skills. These are kind of the basic skills. We're talking about basic skills: networking, operating systems, Windows and Linux from a sysadmin level, even like Mac OS, although you're seeing that more on the workstation side, understanding security applications and hardware. So one of the things when you're learning how to hack or pen test, you need to understand how that particular technology works to be able to secure it and to be able to hack into it. So you need those skills. And kind of when I was getting started out, I had to develop the hacking skills because I'd worked in application security as a sysadmin and network security. So I had taken some courses, but I didn't know how to hack. I had taken the old Foundstone Ultimate Hacking course back in the day, right? It was right around the time McAfee bought out Foundstone. I got to take that course, and I really wasn't ready for it technical wise. So I got some from it, but not. But once I got that job in pen testing, I started taking the OSCP to learn how to hack. So that's kind of where I got started. But learning how to hack, like I say, you need to understand the technology to be able to defend it and to be able to break into it. So building those base level skills to be able to understand what you're doing as a pen tester. And then also developing the hacker mindset. And this is just developed through repetition. So once you learn how to do a specific type of attack and you come along, you see the certain vulnerability or certain misconfiguration, you can figure out how to chain those together, because it's not always a critical or a high that leads to an exploit. Sometimes it's a matter of chaining different vulnerabilities together. So maybe if you've got a Apache Tomcat server or Red Hat JBoss has unrestricted upload, and you're able to upload malicious war files, then you're able to possibly get a foothold that way. So just kind of chaining these things together, because once you kind of get into pen testing, and you probably experienced this too, Stephen, when you're in an airport, you see a USB stick laying on the ground, first thing you think is something malicious or something. You just kind of know how those things can get leveraged. And the more you do that, the more you understand. And I almost compare it was similar to me learning how to troubleshoot. I knew if I see this particular situation, this is how to fix it, or it may take a series of different steps to do that. So that's kind of what I like to, how I describe gaining the hacker mindset. And it's just basically through repetition, doing it over and over again, doing CTFs, doing things like hack the box and try hack me.
Yep.
And then education, we've kind of mentioned some of those, but kind of building out your plan, do a skills inventory of the skills you have, do a gap analysis, and then create a plan to address those skills. So as Stephen was mentioned, you can do self-study. So this is a good way to do that. I actually came out when you mentioned reading the syllabus. I used to do a talk that I gave a couple times called Reversing Your Education. And it's basically the same thing, talking about going and looking at syllabuses for different training courses out there, and then kind of figuring out how to build your own training program, just to go out and research what's in that syllabus and find open source and free resources to do that. And so there's all sorts of training resources that are really good out there, but some of the ones that are lesser cost and I think really good hands-on is to do some of the Try Hack Me, because Try Hack Me starts out a little bit easier. I'd say go through all the free stuff there, and once you start building your skills up, then kind of practice on Hack the Box. Get out there and practice those hacking skills, because once you do any kind of challenges to get a job as a pen tester, a lot of cases you're going to be in an environment that you're performing a pen test against a vulnerable system, and then you write up a pen test report. So be able to do that. Some of the good other resources experience-wise is like bug bounties. So that's a good way to get experience through bug bounties. And also like Cobalt.io, they have pen test as a service, and they really don't require you to have pen testing experience. If you've got certifications and you've got some hands-on experience that may not be professional, you can apply for those jobs. And if you make it through their challenges, you could get hired on. They charge like $1,500 a pen test and only require like 35 hours to do that. And so after you've done that for a year, you can move on to full-time pen testing roles and better paying pen test roles, because now you have the experience. And kind of some of the things with certifications, see what's in demand. Some of the ones I think are least as important is CEH, Pentest Plus. These are part of the DoD directive. I think the number for that DoD directive has changed. But if you're working in the government for the government, sometimes they like these certifications. One of my consulting roles in the past, we were looking at a government project and would require one of us getting the CEH, which these are less difficult to get, but in my opinion, less valuable. Some of your SANS certs, offensive security certs, your practical type certifications are going to be a lot more helpful. And some of the tips when you're preparing for these certifications is make sure you learn the skill, because what people do sometimes is just try to get the certification, focus on passing it, and then once you get a job in the field, then you're going to go back and relearn some of these things. We had someone in our local community that had got a pen testing job, and he took assembly language in college, but I guess the course was just like a question to answer, so you could kind of get by it easily. He didn't really learn assembly, so once he got out in the field, he had to go back and relearn. He had to go back and actually learn assembly. So as you're going along, make sure you're learning these things that you need, that you're using in the field. If you're going to university, your art appreciation and music appreciation aren't the things that can help you. Some of the things for soft skills like writing and speech, that's important, but focus on the things that you'll actually use. And that way you understand it, so you're not having to go back and learn it all over again, which I see, a lot of that happening, and kind of, learn from those mistakes and make sure you're preparing for it. And also, the better you learn the concepts and the content, the better you're going to do in a job interview. If you don't actually have real world experience outside of labs, if you're in a job interview, you can explain how to do things, how you use this tool, how you would try to attack this certain vulnerability. That's going to go a long way in that interview. And that's the type of things that hiring managers are wanting to learn about you.
Yeah, totally.
And so lab environments, Try Hack Me, Hack the Box. There's a lot of good free resources out there. Sans holiday challenges going on there that's going on each year. That's very interesting. And some people, one of the things I'd say too is don't listen to the people that downplay CTFs. There's some people out in recent years, I've heard them put down certifications because they were saying it's too CTF like, but CTFs can be more difficult than actual production systems because they put things together that you may think, okay, this vulnerability is the way to hack the system, but it's not. They're just leading you down another trail, but it's all educational. It's more difficult. Think of it as like a gym. You're going to the gym to work out to get stronger. You may do some things that don't seem normal, but they're going to help you out along the way. And some of the CTFs I really like is like over the wire CTF, which is Linux based, and under the wire. Over the wire, not only is it going to teach you how to hack Linux, it's going to teach you a lot about Linux security. Same thing with under the wire with Windows, and they cover some PowerShell stuff. So using these online hacking labs and document this stuff. So make sure that you're documenting this in a blog, or even doing like video walkthroughs. You're able to document this information. You can write it up on Medium. You could put things on GitHub. If you're writing scripts and stuff, put that on a GitHub so hiring managers can see that. Because if you're competing against someone else that has same certification, same degree, what's going to set you apart? If you're able to document what you're able to do hands-on and what you've done, that's going to help a lot. It doesn't have to be a formal class. You can document, you've done these boxes on Hack the Box and this type of thing, write it up. If you find any CVEs, write those up and add those because it's basically, if you're doing walkthrough videos of some of these different challenges, that's basically like a technical interview, and they can actually see the way you think and what you're capable of doing. And back to what Steven said about submitting CFPs, you can even present at your local cybersecurity group meetings. We had someone who was a recent college grad in the Dallas-Fort Worth area at our DEF CON group meeting, and he was doing a talk on malware or malware analysis, and someone that was in the incident, the IR team at Citigroup saw his presentation, asked for his resume, he got hired. He just kind of was doing an impromptu technical interview unknowingly, but by presenting this hiring manager got to see his skills before, there's ever interview, asked for resume, and he got a job. So getting out there, presenting like that through different meetups, documenting that. If walkthroughs on YouTube is not your thing, then writing can be. And so these are just ways to document that and help you go a long way. And you're able to document your skills outside of just, I've got this certification or I got this degree.
Yeah, totally. Another thing on the vulnerability research side, if you want to move into that space, get the hands-on experience with reverse engineering. And you got to start with a tool like IDA Pro or Ghidra or Binja, one of the other ones out there, and do something simple like Hello World at first in a C program, and look to see where's my code related to the code that was put in by the compiler, and then just slowly increase the complexity of the program. Another thing is, like, if you're relatively comfortable at reversing, or if you just want to jump right into the fire, go grab a DLL or a driver or something like that from a Windows box or other operating system, load it into a disassembler and decompiler. You're going to really quickly see where your shortcomings are. If you need to brush up on C++, or if you need to brush up on this or that. And it kind of sends you down this path of, I don't know what this is that I'm looking at. Let me Google it. Okay, I need to go read about this. And slowly over time, you just get better and better. And you really document, really document well what you're doing, because you'll never remember it when you go back to look at it again unless you document it well. And you just start getting faster and faster. And it just really gives you a lot of hands-on experience.
Yeah, I like that. One of the things you're doing there too is you're creating custom training for yourself, more geared towards you, because you may go take some course that's way over your head, but if you're doing it the way Steven does, then you're able to learn at your pace the way you need to learn, and then you can take that same steps and apply that on other challenges.
Yeah, and that's. I once had to reverse engineer TCP/IP.sys driver, and I signed a contract for 3 months. It took me 6 months. So I thought I was getting a really good deal on the rate they were giving me, until it took me twice the amount of time. But the amount that I learned in that period of time and the number of vulnerabilities I discovered by doing that, you might not even be looking for vulnerabilities, and you start to find them. If you've heard me complain before about the function memcopy, Once you really understand why memcopy and a dynamic size argument construction could be a problem, you start just looking for and eyeballing things and figuring things out pretty quickly. Yeah, I agree, Null 418. Definitely need to learn some programming for sure. Does a role as a quality assurance analyst help or count?
That would help. That would help towards like different application security. I've seen a lot of folks go from like quality assurance over to application security and then into pen testing, because you're testing for bugs. So you're doing the same thing when it comes to pen testing. You're testing for security bugs.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also the softer fields like policy and stuff like that. You can go down as well in governance, in auditing, and all of that.
I think those get overlooked. And if your goal is to eventually be in pen testing or offensive security, the stuff you can learn from audit and compliance are going to make you a more valuable pen tester, because when you're working later on with the GRC folks and auditors, having that background as a pen tester, you're going to be a lot more valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you want to move towards a role like a ISO, a CISO, or something like that, getting those softer skills is definitely helpful as well. Joseph says AI scares me. Yeah, we were talking about that a bit ago. I mean, the way I'm looking at AI right now, machine learning, is, one, stay up to date on, don't ignore it. Like blockchain and smart contract and all that stuff in Web3, I know we can skip over that and you'll be okay probably, unless you want to go down that space because there's really high bug bounties. But with the AI and machine learning side, I don't think it's something anybody should skip. I think back in the day, you could be complacent once you get to a certain point in your career, and as a network engineer or whatever else, and you can ride it out until retirement. That luxury is gone if you were somebody who wanted to think like that. Luckily, I've never had that in me to become complacent, but I don't think there's space for that anymore. And you really just kind of got to push yourself and learn as much as you can about AI umbrella and all the encompassing technology, or technology encompasses, and use it as an aid to make you faster and keep up with the tech, and find out the things that AI does well and let you automate that. And then the things that AI doesn't do well, that's what you can spend your time on. But I wouldn't discount AI, and it is a little intimidating, but I'm personally not worried yet.
Yeah. And one of my favorite quotes is that you won't be replaced by AI. You'll be replaced by someone that knows how to use AI.
Yeah.
And you think about automation, it's been around for a long time, because a friend of mine that you may know as well is Jeff Foley, that created the OWASP Amass. So it's like an OSINT tool. It's an OWASP project, and it's kind of like a attack surface management discovery tool. But he got started back in his network administration days that he created different scripts to automate what he was doing, so he could do more interesting stuff to replace and all the mundane, boring stuff, then focus on the cool stuff and be able to scale his efforts. So I agree. Learning how to use that is going to make you very valuable.
Yeah, and Rai, I see your question about being in Eastern Europe and the market being pretty dead. Are there remote-based companies? Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people who are working for U.S. companies who are based all over Europe, everywhere from Poland, Romania, Spain, England, all over the place. So I think, yes, there are companies that do that. A lot of it goes back to what we've been talking about, which is making a name for yourself. Like, if people don't know who you are and you're just a resume that's in a pile of 1,000 resumes, that's going to be harder for them to find you. So how can you stand out? Obviously, things like certs and all that can help a little bit, but I think what's more important is making that name for yourself. Personally, I don't like social media. I don't want to be on Twitter and X, but but I kind of got pushed into doing it and started to build a brand. And then I saw the value in what I do like about it is being able to give back to the community. But just the more people know who you are, if you go and speak at DEF CON and Black Hat or B-Sides or BrewCon, the more you're going to build that credibility, and people will more likely find you. Also, obviously, there's options like doing HackerOne and Bug Crowd and the other stuff. There's a lot of people in that market, but if you can excel in that space and learn how to do that well, you can make good money that way, of course. Relocation, there's a lot of jobs companies out there that if you're the right person, I mean, look at someone like Sandbox Escaper, if you're familiar with that the individual. They moved from Belgium all the way over to Vancouver to work for Microsoft because they set themselves apart by just contributing to the community and releasing all this cool stuff. Cool.
So yeah, I definitely agree with you on making a name for yourself, building your brand, because I got laid off at the end of February, and the CEO of the company where I work for, he saw that I was out of work, and he had followed me for a while on social media, and he had his co-founder reach out to me. And it took like 6 weeks to get an offer, and part of that was to negotiate and create a role for me. But yeah, it definitely makes it a lot easier to find jobs. Since I've been doing a lot more speaking, it's really easy for me to find jobs when I need a job.
Yeah, for sure.
And so here's like some of the information on the CVEs. This one article is by Joe Helly on Medium. He was talking about how he's just kind of playing around and created found some CVEs. And Bobby Cook was studying for one of I think it was the OSWE or something like that, one of the offensive security certs that's more, they're older web app pen testing cert, but it was more dealing with reversing and being able to code and stuff. And so he was doing research and did CVE. So that's a good way to get some experience, because anything, like I said, you learn how to, if you're finding CVEs, you're going to be higher skilled than people that are just running vulnerability scanners and just detecting what exists. And we kind of covered documenting some of these skills, just kind of a way to go above and beyond the people that are just got the same credentials you do, but be able to document that experience. And this is even good whether you're a beginner or not. We're kind of in an age where, used to it was musicians and different artists had to have a portfolio, but it's really good for security professionals to have a portfolio.
Yeah, I know it's hard for some people too, because a lot of people in the space tend to be more introverted and antisocial, and maybe don't, it's not comfortable for you to do that stuff. A lot of us have to work to kind of come out of our shell and figure out a way to ease into it. I mean, going to conferences and trying to network in person is intimidating. Obviously, we've got the options with the thousands of Discord servers out there and all, but just really trying to network every way possible, doing research on your own, publishing it, doing talks at conferences if you can, writing tools, contributing to open source projects. All those things are going to help you.
Yeah, and some of the things too to keep in taking consideration for those listening is when it comes to our community, a lot of people are just like you. They don't like to be around crowds, and when you kind of find your tribe, it's a little bit easier, because I was always really quiet and reserved, and then once I kind of found my tribe, I'm not. You put me in a room full of executive types and lawyers or these other professionals, and I probably won't say much, but put me in a room for people like the listeners on here and Steven, I don't have a problem talking. And also, if you really want to be able to do public speaking, one of the best things I ever did was go to Toastmasters. I did that for about a year. They were announcing our call for papers for our local B-Sides here in Dallas, B-Sides DFW. And one of the people that was announcing the call for papers said the best career that they'd got in their life was because they spoke at conferences. So the next week I signed up for Toastmasters and did that for about a year and got comfortable with speaking, overcome my fear.
Yeah, good idea. Yep, we've been talking about that.
Yep, we've been talking about that. So yeah,
we've been preempting. Yeah.
So this is very important. I mean, that is like one of the biggest things that helped me, because back in 2018, during DEF CON and Black Hat, I had 2,000 LinkedIn followers and 2,500 Twitter followers, and now I've got over 50,000 Twitter or X followers, and then over 56,000 LinkedIn followers. And this is all from speaking at conferences, sharing different things I'm doing and when I'm out at conferences, and that was it. And to really, if you want to build your brand a little quicker, if you're sharing different content, there's like a X or Twitter profile out there, Benny Shaw. She shares a lot of stuff around security research. All she do is sharing tools, and she's got like over 120,000 followers. So if you don't think you have anything to share, you can share some of the things you're finding during your education and research as well.
Yeah, totally true. I mean, that's another thing. Some people get intimidated where they think they have to be super, super technical and cutting edge vulnerability researcher. Just like Phil was just saying, you don't have to be that person. There's a lot more work out there to get.
And here's something we've been discussing, the professional networking. So yeah, this is very important. I know someone that here in our local community that doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, and they're worried about losing their job now. So it's kind of, as Steven said, if people don't know about you, they can't find you. You could be the best in the world, but if no one knows of you, it's going to be a lot more difficult to find a job.
Null 418. I'm not. Have you? Let me put this up, Phil. If you know the answer to this one, have you considered to invite an expert in Sonar Cube or another tool for vulnerability detection or remediation? I feel like the videos about it are just guide, for instance. I'm not familiar with that tool.
Me either.
Are you,
no, I haven't heard of that.
for vulnerability detection, are you meaning like finding systems that are unpatched, or is it 0-day stuff? What type of stuff do you mean? If you can elaborate a bit, we can try and answer. Cool.
And just some job interviewing tips here. I think it's kind of helpful to know, OWASP top 10. If you're interviewing for a pen test job and it's not a web app pen testing job, they're going to ask you about vulnerabilities from the OWASP top 10. Also be able to explain the basics like the 3-way TCP handshake and OSI model. When I find that in my past interviewing with people, when I was interviewing directors, maybe they've been out of the tech space for a while, they always kind of remember the basics and it's kind of questions that they ask. And Tiberius has some AppSec interview questions out on his website. He, on X a while back, he would just put questions out there, post questions, how to answer those to help people with interviews. And he put the collection of those on his, actually on his website. And I shared that with some people that are going through some AppSec interviews. Went pretty well. Jason Blanchard, also known as Banjo Crashland, he did like a whole series of videos, especially like during the pandemic, on how to find a job like a hacker. And it shows you a lot of good techniques for researching jobs and so forth. And then Jason Haddix did a presentation a while back on NahamSec's YouTube and Twitch stream on how to create a better InfoSec resume. And one of the valuable things about this is he's showing how to document some of the things like bug bounty and some of your educational stuff on your resume. But the Banjo Crashland list of how to look for a job, I've talked to a lot of people that went through those steps and use those techniques when looking for a job. And a lot of it, the guy is from a marketing background, but he shares a lot of good common sense stuff about job hunting. So that's a really good resource I recommend.
Yeah, and Jonathan Ryder and I on the Off by One Discord, we haven't done one in a while, but we're planning to do one again. We've done some mock interviews. So we've been doing mock interviews around vulnerability research, where we're the interviewers and we're asking the type of questions that we've come across when we've done interviews, as well as questions that we would ask if we were interviewing someone. So it can be a little intimidating, especially if you're the guinea pig going up to be the candidate. But it's good practice. I always say, even if you're not looking for a job, going and interviewing at companies like Facebook, Google, Apple, or Meta, whatever, all these, Microsoft, their interviews are hard and it's multiple rounds, and it's a really, really good practice, good learning opportunity. It's intimidating, it's humbling, but then you kind of know what you need to do to prepare for the next one you're going to do.
I do see that Null 418 did follow up, says that Sonar Cube is like Nuclei, Sneak, and SimGrip are tools for vulnerability detection, like Code, RC. Yeah. What's cool about that is anyone interested in automation, recently Project Discovery, the makers of Nuclei, just posted a blog post here recently showing how to use AI to automate creating templates for finding vulnerabilities with Nuclei. So if you're interested in automation with generative AI, it's something good to check out.
That's cool. I did a talk a couple weeks ago, if you look on the channel, on around using machine learning or AI for vulnerability research as well. And one of the things, an accidental thing that happened was, my goal was to create a series of agents that look at patch diffs. So by teaching the model all the prior patch diffs that have been done and where the vulnerability is, that I could take new patches that come out from Microsoft, feed it into it, and it would quickly be able to tell me what type of vulnerability it is and maybe give me some tips on exploiting it. A side effect of that was it had found a block of code that it had seen in one of the diffs that I put in from years ago, and it found that same code block in a new code base that I put in and found a 0-day that way. So they're really good around hunting that kind of stuff as well. The challenge with it, if you happen to watch a presentation, is kind of the back and forth. If you go with a generic agent, like a chatbot, like ChatGPT or something, you end up having to lead the witness a lot. You end up having to teach it more than it's teaching you. But once you kind of customize a model around the things you need, it becomes a really, really good resource to help you with things like static code analysis and decompiled code and all of that.
Sounds awesome.
Cool. So we're going to be wrapping it up here. Any last minute questions before we move on? I want to thank Phil again so much for coming on here. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thanks. It was an honor to join. I was really thrilled whenever I got your message on X about asking me to join. So
No, happy to have you, man. I think it's great. Also, a reminder for next Friday, if you didn't hear me earlier, it's going to be a session with Atlas on car hacking, medical hacking, device hacking, like embedded hacking. So he's got a lot of experience in that space, and I'm excited about that because a lot of smaller boutique organizations like IO Active, where people like Barnaby Jack used to work, are who specialize in that space. And it's really neat to get some kind of thoughts from an expert on that. Like Phil said, hacking an insulin pump or a pacemaker and how you would go about approaching that. So I'm looking forward to that one. Cool. Well, I don't see any new questions popping up, but hopefully it was valuable for you, and we will see you next time. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and thanks again, Phil.
thank you.